Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back. We're going to do another week of Bible stories. Our story today is found in Joshua, and it's called The Warrior Leader. After Moses died, God gave his people a new leader. His name was Joshua, which means the Lord saves. Joshua was going to lead God's people into a very special land that God had promised to give them. By this time, God's people had been wandering around in the baking hot sun for 40 years. So you can imagine how sick of the sand and all the yellow tents and walking around and being hot, how sick they were of all of that. And how happy they were to reach the edge of the desert to see their beautiful new home right there in front of them, all cool and green and lovely. There was one problem: Jericho. Jericho was a city, but it wasn't just any old city. It was a fortress, and it stopped anyone from getting into the land. And the people looked at Jericho, at the big, giant, scary walls all around it, at the tall, towering ramparts, at the heavy iron gates bolted shut, and then they looked at each other. What would they do? No one knew. No one, that is, but God. God knew. And God told Joshua what to do. But Joshua must have looked very surprised, because it was a very odd battle plan indeed, as you'll soon find out. When God made his people a promise, then God made his people a promise, and he said, "I will always be with you. I will never ever leave you. If you do what I say, your lives in the new land will be happy and everything will go well." So Joshua gathered his army together. They had their swords and their spears and their shields. They were ready to fight. But the plan wasn't to fight. It was about trusting God and doing what he said. Joshua's army went marching and marching and marching and marching around the city day after day after day. "They're too scared to fight," the people in Jericho said. But they were wrong. God's people weren't scared. They were waiting for God to tell them what to do. On the seventh day, God told his people to march around the city not once, but 7 times. Then God told everyone to make as much noise as they could. Has anyone ever told you to make as much noise as you possibly can? Well, imagine that noise. Add 93,000 other people making that noise too, and you get the idea. Ear-splitting. And as if that was not enough, the stones started splitting too, because the huge, strong walls of Jericho just crumbled to the ground as if they were made of sand, and Jericho vanished in a giant cloud of dust. So it was that God's people entered their new homes, and they didn't have to fight to get in. They only just walked. Joshua said, "God has brought us safely here. Now will you do what he says?" Everyone said, "We promise." "Only God can make your heart happy," Joshua said. "So don't pray to pretend gods." "No," they said, "never again." I'm afraid that they didn't keep their promise. They didn't do what God had said. And many years later, just as God warned them, things would go very badly for God's people. They would lose their home. take off as slaves. And God's people would scatter into many different lands. But God's plan was still working. One day he would give his people another leader in another home. But this home, no one could ever take from you, ever. And there they are, very, very happy.